Okay, part 3 for this. Inauguration ceremony. Ferdinand had told me to use the day after my baptism ceremony to rest. He had most likely told Elvira about this before leaving, given that she also instructed me to stay in bed for the day that morning at the breakfast table. And considering how sometimes my body reacted negatively to being forced back into being healthy with a potion, I was more than glad to comply. Rosemine, do you have a moment? Lamprecht? I do, though I can't leave my bed at the moment. I just came to check up on how you're doing. Lord Wolfer is pretty worried himself, so... A glum-looking Lamprecht came to see me before he was due to leave for work, perhaps as a result of the harsh scolding he had been given. He had been so bright and lively yesterday that seeing him so down made me wonder just how hard Ferdinand and Karstead had scolded him, which made my heart hurt a little. Had I been a normal child, my fall would have ended with a couple of scratches at worst. It wouldn't have been traumatized him like this. Ferdinand let it happen on purpose as a lesson to Wilfred, so please don't worry about it too much. I can imagine Lord Ferdinand wanted it to happen while he was still nearby, since he is capable of using magic and giving potions himself. This ended with no more than a scolding, since you were healed almost immediately, but what if it had happened at the castle without any healers around? If you had died there, Lord Wolfer would be far more distraught than he is now. Why is it that the brutal, cold-hearted, rationalist Ferdinand suddenly sounds like a super good person? He is a good person. He's just keeping that hidden, or more around you, because you've gotten to see him a whole heck of a lot more than everybody else. This is something that I should have taught Wilfred myself without Lord Ferdinand needing to get involved. Lamprecht was deeply regretting the incident, but if you ask me, Ferdinand was the one who should be regretting traumatizing everyone. He needed to learn to be nicer to other people, myself included. Don't worry, Lamprecht. As long as you and Wilfred are more careful from now on, everything will be fine. Rosemine, you were on the verge of death, nearly slain by our hands. All she did was get some scrapes and cuts. Jesus Christ. I mean, I know her body isn't very good, but still, you would think that wouldn't get you on the verge of death. And yet you expressed nothing but concern for us. What enormous compassion. The light returned to Lamprecht's eyes as his face was overcome by a mix of shock and admiration. Oh no, I feel like I've nudged him in the wrong direction. Lamprecht, my dear brother, you have the wrong idea. I'm just used to that kind of situation, so a single slip-up doesn't really mean much to me. I see. So your empathy is just that profound. I feel like nothing I say at this point will change his mind. He's just not listening anymore. Whatever. I dropped the subject, giving up on Lamprecht even ever understanding me. That was when he undid a bundle of cloth from which he retrieved a book. I asked Lord Ferdinand what he thought I should get you as a gift, and he gave me this, saying it would be perfect for you. I can't say I followed, though. That's a book, isn't it? He said this is a book you've never read before, and could finish in a day, but Rosemont, can you really read a book this thick? Lamprecht asked dubiously, practically comparing me and the book. But it'll be a piece of cake. I can read it. I will read it. Lamprecht, thank you ever so much. I'm glad to see that you're this happy about it. Well, I have to return to the castle. Rest well, Rosemine, okay? Okay. Ferdinand was a brutal rationalist, but he was a good person. He may have correctly predicted that by giving me a book I couldn't actually finish in a day, it would lead to me faking being sick and avoiding going to the temple tomorrow, but that was fine by me. Thank you, High Priest! I spent the day rolling around in bed, resting for the first time in ages, while reading a book about effectively mobilizing troops during warfare. A lot of the concepts were largely based around magic, which made them pretty hard to understand, but it was really fun trying to figure things out. When tomorrow came, I felt great, no doubt thanks to the combined powers of Ferdinand's healing and his potion. Plus, having spent a day reading a book in bed, I sent someone to tell Ella and Rosina that we'd be going back to the temple. After breakfast, once I was ready to leave, my guards, Daniel and Bridget, arrived. Bridget, apparently. They knelt in front of me and crossed their arms over their chests. Good morning, Lady Rosemine. Today we are returning to the temple. I ask that you accompany me, I said, and they both responded, ma'am, before standing up sharply. I went to stand up too, but Bridget stopped me. Please wait here for a moment, Lady Rosemine. I will send an ordonnance to Lord Ferdinand. Bridget took out her shining wand and tapped a yellow face down while murmuring, ordonnance, which turned into a white bird. She then said, Lady Rosemine is now heading for the temple. Before swiping her wand, through the air, sending the bird flying off. It returned not long after and said "understood" 3 times in Ferdinand's voice before morphing back into a face tone. That had really surprised me the first time I saw it, but after living around magic tools for long enough, it just felt kind of normal. I was adjusting to my surroundings shockingly fast, if you asked me. With our report concluded, Daniel and Bridget escorted me into a carriage. Ella and Rosina will be following in a separate carriage for attendance. Please tell Lord Ferdinand that I said hello, and remember to take your duties seriously, dear. Yes, Mother. Carstairs and Cornelius had already headed to the Knight's Order, so Elvira was the only one to see me off. The carriage started smoothly, and we headed to the temple, the pure white buildings passing by on either side of us. Bridget, have you ever been to the temple or the lower city? Yes, milady, but only while passing through. This is my first time going through the Nobles' Gate with the intention of staying. Bridget was in fact the little sister of Viscount Ilgnir, Viscount being the title given to Med Noble Gibbs, who ruled a province in the south of the city. As such, she had flown over the lower city on her high beast and passed through in a carriage with her family, but had never actually stayed there or even stepped out of the carriage. Daniel, having experience in the lower city thanks to me, grimaced a bit and tossed Brigitte some words of encouragement. The temple's not so bad, but visiting in the lower city will be rough for a woman. Good luck. Welcome back, Lady Rosemine, Fran said. He had waited for me at the temple's front entrance. Given that I had been moved to the nobles' quarter as spring was starting to fade, and now that we were approaching the height of summer, it had been a long time since Fran and I had seen each other. I have returned, Fran. Has anything changed since I've been gone? Your room has changed, and Gil has been working like a madman. With that in mind, I would say that much has changed. I'm looking forward to seeing that. Bridget, this is Fran, my head attendant. Fran, this is Bridget, a knight and one of my guards. Once I had finished introducing them to each other, I headed to the High Bishop's chambers. It was at the far end of the temple's noble section, and I remember passing by it quite regularly during the winter dedication ritual. Monica and Nicola are preparing to cook in the kitchen now, and Gil is in the workshop. I believe you will all meet after your inauguration, Fran said, before opening the door. I walked into my new chambers. The decorations and furniture had been changed according to Rosina's list, now looking much more feminine, and with fairy tale-esque flower designs, decorating the entire room in shades of red. The chambers barely resembled what they used to look like. There was one resemblance, though, the altar holding the 30-ish centimeter tall gold god statue, Bible, and candle placed 30 centimeters apart from each other with the Bible in the middle. I could guess that this was a necessary part of the High Bishop's chambers, which reminded me, back when I had become an apprentice Blue Shrine Maiden, Ferdinand had said that vowing to serve the gods and being given robes was normally done before the altar in the High Bishop's room. That meant any future Blue priests and Shrine Maidens would say their vows here. I wonder whether I'll be able to handle that. I think you should be able to. This certainly is a cute room. It suits you well, Lady Rosemine, and I never would have thought the High Bishop's chambers would have so much money poured into them, Bridget said in awe, nodding to herself repeatedly. Carstairs had paid for the entire redecoration, so my wallet hadn't been hurt by it at all. Maybe I should give a portion of my workshop earnings to Carstairs to pay for my living expenses? That's up to you. I don't think he would accept it. But, I mean, you could ask. Like I said, I don't think he will take it. I think he will say just to keep it. The High Priest also instructed that rooms for male and female knights be prepared on either side of the High Bishop's chamber so that Lady Rosemine's guards could stay the night. 2 separate rooms, each with multiple beds. Please to inform me if there are any inconveniences, Fran said, so I went to check out the rooms. The male rooms was fitted as a guest room. It was simple without any single unnecessary thing in it. According to Daniel, it was just like the men's room in the knight's dorms. Carstairs ordered the rooms he made similarly, since he figured staying somewhere familiar would be for the best. I assumed the female rooms would also be the same as the dorms, but apparently when Carstairs had investigated the female half of the knight's dorms, he discovered that the women had all changed their rooms to suit their personal tastes, leaving the original layout unrecognizable. Carstairs eventually gave up on catering to the room to a wide variety of preferences and just ordered for it to be fitted like mine, figuring that a room good enough for the Archduke's adopted daughter would be good enough for a female knight of any status. In other words, the room was feminine. Gudul, the goddess of earth, was considered the symbol of femininity, and the room was themed around her royal color of red, with bright pink flower decorations covering everything. It was so cute that I figured a tough woman like Bridget might be put off by it. This certainly is a cute room. Bridget repeated the same thing she had said about my room, but this time there was a tinge of surprise and worry mixed in her voice. She seemed a bit conflicted by how cute it was. Bridget, if you don't like the room, you do not need to concern yourself with that, Lady Rosamund. It is the guest room. All I will be doing here is sleeping, so there is no need to go out of your way to change the decoration. I will be quite fine. Bridget said, her amethyst eyes softening as she gave me a gentle smile. I knew better than to doubt the kind words of a cool lady knight. I returned to my High Bishop's chambers just as Monica had left the kitchen. Ella had returned, and Monica was going to do her normal work while Nicola helped cook. Welcome back, Lady Rosamund. Once Rosina and Monica finished putting away my things and setting the harpspiel in place, they changed me into my ceremonial High Bishop robes. Apparently these were the robes Ferdinand had ordered from the Gilberta Company. It seems that, due to a lack of time, they simply altered the previous High Bishop's robes in haste, Monica said. I nodded. That made sense. No way did we have the time to wait for cloth of this quality to be prepared from scratch. With the Archduke's mother as his older sister, the previous High Bishop had robes made from the highest quality cloth available. It felt wonderful to the touch and was very light on me. Sadly, though, the crest wasn't the one I had spent so long thinking up for the mine workshop. Instead, it was a lion just like the one on Ferdinand's robes, signifying a child of the Archduke. Dang, I really like that crest too. Well, I mean, you could keep your ceremonial blue robes as like a memento of that. Or later on, maybe you could ask the Gilberta Company to maybe make some robes over time. That way it'll signify your own crest. I mean, hello, you're the child of the Archduke now. It fits still. I pursed my lips while fiddling with the crest, and Monica gave me a worried frown. I know that it must be unpleasant to wear clothes worn by the previous High Bishop, but please bear with it for now. Oh, that's not it, Monica. I'm just a little disappointed that the crest isn't my own, the one I liked a lot. I don't care who made or wore an outfit as long as it doesn't embarrass me or the people around me. Hate the person, not the clothes. I had spent years wearing nothing but second-hand clothing. If you were worried about who had worn a particular piece of clothing before you, then you wouldn't be able to wear second-hand clothing at all. Considering that I had once worn an outfit made from literal rags sewn together in order to gather soot, I would probably receive divine punishment if I complained about robes as beautiful. You are such a wonderful person, Lady Rosamund. Everything Wilma said was true. Monica whispered, her eyes glittering, but I had no idea what had inspired her to say that. I thought for a second, then snapped my fingers in realization. Fran and Gil had seen me walking around the lower city in my raggedy commoner clothes, but Monica only knew me as an apprentice Blue Shrine Maiden, and now the adopted daughter of the Archduke. She was convinced I had been suffering in silence as a high-status arch-noble, used to always wearing new clothes, and since Bridget was here, I couldn't correct her. I gave up on an explaining and decided to just let her misunderstandings be. The robes seem to fit you perfectly. With that sorted, I will now discuss today's plans, Fran said once he had looked over my ceremonial robes, heading to a nearby desk. Apparently, Ferdinand will be coming here later to discuss a few matters, and then the inauguration ceremony will be held in the afternoon. We also had a meeting planned with the Gilberta Company tomorrow. I'm finally going to get to see the Lutz again. Maybe. I mean, you should be able to. I mean, they're going to the temple, so you don't have to worry about Lutz not getting to be there. Unless he's going and doing something with Gil, and at the other orphanage, who knows. By the time Fred had finished his explanation, Ferdinand was just arriving. It turned out that he would generally be coming to my chambers from now on instead of me going to his, since I was of higher status than him as far as the public was concerned. I thanked him for the book he had given Lampret and for preparing the ceremonial robes, rooms for the knights, and so on. Still, I'm surprised I'm being inaugurated so quickly, I said. Ferdinand responded by saying that it was an exclusive ceremony performed within the temple, so there really wasn't much to prepare. I double-checked the ceremony procedures and asked why we were rushing it so much. Considering that it was a gathering of blue priests, I would have thought that they would be given at least a few days' notice. This ritual is necessary for you to use the High Bishop's chambers. Furthermore, if you are not officially inaugurated as High Bishop, I cannot give you the keys to the Bookworm. Oh, now that's a big deal. We need to get this over with as soon as possible. I'm assuming these aren't the only reasons, though. The keys to the Bookworm were definitely important, but it was hard to imagine Ferdinand going through the effort of speeding things up for that alone. There had to be some deeper reasons here. The blue priests were informed days ago and posed no issue here. We knew thanks to the potion and healing magic that you would recover soon. But in any case, you should be more concerned with accelerating this small internal ceremony than anyone else. Otherwise, you won't have enough time to finish what Sylvester spoke about, will you? Wait, what did Sylvester say? I asked, tilting my head in confusion. Ferdinand drummed a finger against his temple and shot me an annoyed glare. Were you not listening? I am referring to the eatery and the expansion of printing. Well, I remember Sylvester talking about building workshops in neighboring cities to expand the printing industry, but what's this about the eatery, I asked. I knew from a hastily written letter Benno had sent me that in return for letting Hugo and Todd train under Lace, he had let the guildmaster join in funding the Italian restaurant. But that was all. I didn't know any details. Benno received a direct decree from Sylvester. He is to meet with a scholar official, investigate the orphanage of a nearby city, and organize their findings, all before the star buying ceremony. Oh! I just realized something. She's going to be performing that ceremony. Oh, no. Is she going to be ready for that? Then he will need to repeat these findings directly to Sylvester during a meeting at the Italian restaurant. What? That is naturally too great of a burden for Benno. Help him where you can, especially now that the deadline has been accelerated by your adoption. Apparently, Benno was so overworked that even Ferdinand sympathized enough to try to help out a bit. I nodded hard, feeling the blood drain from my face. I need to finish this dumb inauguration ceremony as soon as possible so I can get to helping Benno. The inauguration ceremony was held in the chapel, with the blue priests, their attendants, and all gray priests and shrine maidens who had come of age in attendance. It was being led by Ferdinand, who dryly stated that the previous high bishop had been dismissed and that the archduke had decided on a new high bishop. Meanwhile, I was behind a door, waiting for him to call for me. And so, according to the archduke's wishes, the new high bishop will be his adopted daughter, Rosemine. Ferdinand said, the door in front of me slowly opening as he spoke. When it was completely open, I could see the rows and rows of gray priests standing silently in the chapel and Ferdinand standing atop the steps. Offer your prayers to the gods and welcome her arrival. Praise be to the gods. While feeling nostalgic for the rows of Glico poses that I hadn't seen in a long time, I took Fran's hand and gracefully walked to the center of the chapel. I climbed the stairs to the highest point, which allowed me to look over the entire chapel. There was a row of about 10 blue priests closest to us, a few of whom were gaping at the sight of me. Ha ha! Ha ha! Karma's a bitch. Now you're going to get it. Possibly. Or now that your actions have come back to bite you, I should say. Those who knew me as mine, or had mocked me when we crossed paths in the halls, all had their eyes wide open in shock. But some were just looking at me over with blank, half-interested expressions, most likely the people who had never seen me as mine and so didn't recognize me. The stark contrast between their reactions made them easy to tell apart. Thank you all for coming on this auspicious summer day, blessed by Leidenschaft's shining rays. I am Rosemine, and my father, the Archduke, has entrusted me with the position of High Bishop. The Archduke's adopted daughter? That can't be right. She's a commoner. One blue priest shouted. Ferdinand repeated the same explanation that Sylvester had given at my baptism. That wasn't enough to convince the blue priest, who continued his furious protests. High priest, you're the Archduke's brother. You would have known if she was an archnoble. You wouldn't have called her a commoner. None of this makes any sense. If even the previous high bishop, who frequently spoke of being closer to the Archduke than anyone else thanks to his high birth, did not know, then it is unreasonable to expect that I would. There it is, the ultimate technique. It's all his fault, not mine. The old high bishop really is perfect for wrongfully pinning the blame on. Ferdinand had to resort to the ultimate technique just like Sylvester had. But thanks to that, almost everyone accepted the situation, even if they didn't fully believe it. Almost everyone, which means that blue priest might not still accept it. The gray priests and shrine maidens in particular, who were used to obeying orders from above, accepted it easily, without really thinking too hard about it. They would tell the kids in the orphanage about all this later, instructing them to call me Lady Rosemine instead of Sister Mine from now on, so that I will be treated 100% like an archnoble even in the temple. If you doubt that I am an archnoble adopted by the Archduke, you may ask Karlstadt, the commander of the Knights Order, or Ob Ehrenfest, my adopted father, to see what they say, I declared, indirectly telling them to shut up. And with that done, all that was left was to list my future goals in flowery language and then pray to the gods. Almighty King and Queen of the endless skies, Almighty Eternal Fire who rule the mortal realm, O Goddess of Water Flutrain, O God of Fire Leidenschaft, O Goddess of Water Wind Shutsaria, O Goddess of Earth Geduld, O God of Life Abiglaven. We offer you our prayers and gratitude, I said, and the priests all took their positions. Praise be to the gods, glory be to the gods. Once everyone had prayed to the gods, I took my leave, Ferdinand taking my hand as I walked down the stairs. But about halfway down, I noticed one blue priest deliberately avoiding eye contact, instead looking at the ground. I stopped to take a closer look and immediately recognized his middle-aged noble features. Oh my, are you who I think you are? You know Egmont, Rosemine. He's the one who made a mess of my book room, I believe. His name is... Oh, here we go! Your actions come back and bite you! Oh, I love this, guys! Justice is gonna be served. And can she even do that now? I mean, she's the adopted daughter of the Archduke now, and now the High Bishop, so she technically could. Maybe. It wouldn't be a smart idea, but she could. Haha, found you! I cackled to myself, and despite the fact that I wasn't even crushing him, Eggman paled at once. He desperately flapped his mouth, trying to say words, but failing hard as he looked around for help. It was then that he made eye contact with Ferdinand, and the light bulb popping up over his head hurriedly began to make excuses. The previous High Bishop ordered me to do that. I didn't do it by choice. There it is again, the ultimate technique. It's all his fault, not mine. Goodness, High Bishop, you sure are popular. You mean previous High Bishop. However, no ultimate technique would keep working forever. The sin of messing up my previous bookworm, Brush's bookworm was profound, and my anger for those who spited books was doggedly persistent. Neither would fade by trying to push the blame onto the High Bishop. I see, so the High Bishop ordered it then, I said. Eggman nodded, his lips curling into a smile purely expressed in the glee of having escaped anger. There wasn't a shred of regret nor any indication of self-reflection. I gave a smile of my own, crushing him just a little to show I was still angry. Your life is mine. Do not think I shall forgive you a second time. Despite having solved the situation with stunning restraint and perfect logic while avoiding an absolute bloodfest, the second we were back in my chambers, Ferdinand scolded me for going too far. It just didn't make sense. How are you going too far? The only thing you went too far on was doing the whole crushing thing, but still. That's strange. You're the one who taught me that the most logical and effective course of action is to beat a lesson to someone by emotionally traumatizing them. Yeah, hello, Wilfred, Lamprecht, everybody else who had to deal with this? That is the only case when you are dealing with someone who will not listen no matter what you say, Ferdinand replied with an uncomfortable frown. But as far as I was concerned, it would be a huge problem if Eggman had ignored me and messed up the bookworm a second time. At the moment, I don't care whether or not he's willing to listen. What I want is for all the Blue Priests to know that it won't end well for them if they touch my bookworm. And I accomplished that in quite a rational way, did I not? I asked with a smile. Yes, you did! Yeah, because you made an example out of the guy who did it and said, yeah, if any of y'all do that like he did, y'all aren't going to end well for y'all. But didn't say that. She showed it. Ferdinand gave me a fake smile in return. Your rationality is spurred by emotion, which makes it all the more terrifying. It is impossible to say what far-reaching impact your actions will have. Oh? But your rationality is spurred by complicated plotting and has quite a far-reaching impact on many things. So yeah, you're kind of doing the same dang thing. As we smiled coldly at each other, I suddenly remembered something important. Eggman being traumatized didn't matter, and now is definitely not the time to be having an evil staring contest with Ferdinand. Now then, Ferdinand, the baptism and inauguration ceremony went perfectly, and we each took care of the dangerous people threatening us. I would like the keys to the bookworm now. I want to read as much as possible before beating blood to the others tomorrow, I said, breaking into an eager grin as I held out a hand. Ferdinand shut his eyes tight and cradled his head in his hands. If you collapse again, expect no potions or any healing from me. Fine by her. Reunited at last. I tried running to the bookworm the instant Ferdinand gave me the key, only to be stopped by Fran. Lady Rosamond, you have been absent for quite some time. There's much I need to report, and much we must discuss. The bookworm is not going anywhere, and while it was only briefly, I am certain that your crushing of Brother Eggman as the new High Bishop was more than enough to stop him from disturbing it again anytime soon. You may read at your leisure once we have finished our urgent business. I looked between Fran and the door, then scanned the room for anyone who might prove to be an ally. Monica was standing behind Fran. Rosina was polishing the harpspiel, showing absolutely no intention of getting involved. Smart. Daniel was avoiding eye contact, asked to avoid getting wrapped up in the situation. Smart idea. And Bridget was watching over the proceedings with a frown. It seemed that no one would be willing to support me. But listen, the others are coming tomorrow, so I want to get as much reading done today as I can. I pleaded. If the Gilberta Company was busy enough to earn sympathy from Ferdinand, then there was no doubt in my mind that I would end up hopelessly busy as well. Today would surely be the last day I could relax and read at my own pace. But my pleading only served me a smile from Fran, similar to the one that Ferdinand would always give me. Rest easy, Lady Rosamond. There is much for you to read here in this very room. Before you browse the shelves in the book room, please look through and memorize these, all before the Starbind ceremony. Yes, you need to do that, because you're going to have to perform that ceremony, good lady. Well, probably with the High Priest's help, but still. At that, he began piling boards onto my desk. They had apparently been organized by Fran and my other attendants, and detailed a wide range of prayers and ritual proceedings. But I wasn't the one who recoiled upon seeing the huge stack of boards. Bridget was. Wait just a moment. There are simply far too many boards here for her to read. Lady Rosemine is still young, and this is too much to load onto a child who has only just finished her baptism ceremony. Hello, lady! She has been reading for quite some time. Let her be. She was wanting to go to the book room to read, so hello, I think she'll be fine. Fran grimaced slightly. He was no doubt stressed that a noble was contending with him, but nonetheless returned Bridget a calm look and stood his ground. Lady Rosemine must participate in the Starbind ceremony as the High Bishop. If she were to fail at her first ritualistic ceremony, it would serve as a stain that would tarnish her reputation forevermore. Surely you understand, Dame Bridget, what happens to those in noble society who have poor reputations. Fran had learned from Ferdinand how noble society worked while serving as his attendant. He remembered what Ferdinand had needed to be cautious of and what judgments he had laid out upon others. I understand. It seems I spoke out of turn, Bridget conceded before taking a step back. The stress vanished from Fran's face almost instantly, and he held it board to me. Here you are, Lady Rosemine. I wrote that one, Monica exclaimed, her eyes glittering as she looked down at me. I worked hard for your sake, Lady Rosemine. Not only could I not refuse the innocent smile of someone who had given her all for my sake, but I had approximately zero chance of escaping from Fran, who was standing behind her, wearing a smile of his own. Once again, I was reminded that Fran had been trained by the one and only Ferdinand. Jeez, Fran, you're letting him influence you way too much. Okay, I'll memorize them. To reward both of your efforts, I too shall put my all into learning. Isn't this great, Fran? Monica exclaimed. It looked like putting everything together for Lady Rosemine really wasn't a waste of time. Lady Rosemine would never ignore the hard work done by her servants. Now then, Lady Rosemine, please start by reading the ritual proceedings described here. Having given up on going to the book room, I tearfully took the wooden board from Fran. These are tears of happiness. I'm just so happy to have attendants who care about me so much. Soon, my sweet bookworm, soon. And so, my day was spent learning about the Starbind ceremony and the duties expected of the High Bishop. As I ate breakfast the next morning, Gil informed me that Ferdinand and I would be meeting with the Gilberta Company later that day to see how their work on expanding the printing industry was progressing. Ferdinand apparently wanted to receive the report before the scholars had a chance to fudge the data. Yeah, you want to do that, definitely. You're going to want a copy of that. Once Gil had finished his own breakfast, he burst out of the room to go and let the Gilberta Company know that they would be seeing the high priest. His trip with the scholars had supposedly been quite the ordeal, but during it he had developed strong bonds of companionship with Benno and Lutz. Good. Gil had also become a lot better at reading and writing while I was gone, to the point where he could now write reports on his own. That's good! He worked hard! His frantic hard work since being thrown into the midst of merchants and scholars had finally paid off. I had patted Gil's head and praised him like I usually did, only for Bridget to very uncomfortably inform me that it wasn't proper to interact with attendants like that. He needs praise! He needs praise! That's what gets him to work hard! Well, it seems that an arch-noble girl patting her attendant's head isn't looked upon very favorably. I suppose I could have guessed that much, though. But you could do that in private, girl. Good God. It's not like you're doing it out in public with others can see. As long as it's like in the privacy of your room, or the workshop or whatever, it'd be fine. The Gilberta Company was due to arrive at third bell, and would be staying for lunch once they had given us their report. To that end, Ella and Nicola headed to the orphanage director's chambers once they had finished preparing breakfast in my new chambers. Fran went with them so that he could prepare tea for us, leaving Monica behind to take care of me and accompany me as I walked through the temple. It was standard practice for music to be played during meals, attended by the nobility, and so, once she had finished breakfast, Rosina also went to the orphanage director's chambers, harpspiel in hand. Meanwhile, I stayed behind in the High Bishop's chambers to continue yesterday's memorization. Rosamine, it is time to go. Ferdinand came to my chambers, accompanied by an attendant named Zom, instead of the usual Arno. Oh no, he's going to have to tell her. What's she going to say? I was ready to go, and so departed from my chambers with Monica. Rosamine, I understand that you may be excited to be meeting your compomator associates for the first time in such a long time. But remain in control of yourself until I have finished speaking. In return, I will turn a blind eye to whatever occurs in your hidden room afterward, so you may soothe your aching heart as much as you like. Ferdinand muttered as we walked. I could gather that he was allowing me some time to hug Lutz, so that he could escape my hugs himself. Honestly, that was more than fine by me. Understood. We passed through the halls until we arrived at the orphanage director's chambers, at which point Monica opened the door for me. It had been so long since I had visited my old chambers that I was immediately filled with nostalgia. Even seeing the familiar furniture brought peace to my heart. I'm glad to see that not much has changed here, I said. As we waited for third bell, Ferdinand and I discussed the Starbind ceremony at a table on the second floor. It was going to be a busy day, for sure. The Lower Cities Festival would take place in the morning, followed by the Starbind ceremony in the afternoon. Hold on. Wouldn't that be the opposite? Because isn't the Starbind ceremony the wedding itself? You know, for that to happen, and then they leave the temple and go down to the lower city, and that's when they get pelted with the Tau fruit? Right? Or am I wrong? We also talked about what the orphans would be doing on that day, and following some relentless negotiations, Ferdinand agreed to let us play like we had done last year, as long as Lutz had the time and Wilma stayed behind to keep things in order. Third bell rang. It wasn't long at all before Gil brought the visitors from the Gilberta Company over, who had been waiting at the gate in the lower city. There was Benno, Mark, and also Lutz. It looked like Lutz had gotten a bit taller since I had last seen him. His face looked a little more grown up, too. I had been surprised by how much Gil had grown, but it seemed Lutz was maturing fast as well. I pushed down the urge to leap into his arms instead, just offering a small little wave, but the second my hand even twitched, Ferdinand glared at me and murmured, "Rose mine?" in a low voice. I'm sorry, how could— What? She's not even allowed to wave? Jeez! Now then, Benno, I would like for you to tell me what you saw and what your thoughts were during the trip. Hold nothing back. I desire a report that is not from a scholar official. As you wish. It was only when Benno started talking that I learned that Ehrenfest was the only city that had a temple. Ferdinand noted that it would be ridiculous for provinces to be filled with blue priests as though it were obvious, but I was thinking about things from an Earth perspective where every city usually had at least one church. True, but yeah, that wouldn't make sense. Because then there would be more than one high bishop and high priest. But here, there was only one big temple in the entire duchy. Everywhere else had shrines and whatnot dedicated to individual gods. Stores in the lower city worshipped the god of trade and the goddess of water. Smithies worshipped the god of smithing and the god of fire. And those at the gates worshipped both the goddess of wind and the patron deity of travelers. In farming towns, there were small chapels in the winter mansions where all gods were worshipped, but there were no smaller shrines as a result. As for orphanages, they were generally run by mayors and the leading powers of cities. To preserve peace and order, the Archduke several generations ago had commanded that orphanages be constructed near the estate of the mayor. Orphans who were found would be taken in, and in return for giving them food and shelter, the mayors were granted the right to use them like slaves. Oh. The orphans were more or less like gray priests and shrine maidens, only with their masters being the mayors and city authorities rather than blue priests. The orphanages in Haas was in a horrifying state, Benno said. It was at this point that Gil stood up to begin his report, wherein he compared the orphanage to how the temple's orphanage had been before the workshop was established. Unlike in Ehrenfest, the orphanages in other towns and cities were not built into a temple. This meant that the orphans living there were not given divine gifts, and as mayors weren't rich nobles, barely any money was sent to support them. That said, while these orphans lived in unhygienic filth, none of them had been completely abandoned like the children in the cellar had. The children aren't locked in the orphanage, so they survive by scavenging for food while gathering in the forest. I think their circumstances should improve at least a little if we can get a workshop running over the summer, before autumn, Gil said, concluding his report. He had grown so much since his days as a cheeky little brat, overcome with the same sense of pride that a parent would have looking over their child's straight-A report card. I smiled at Gil and gave him a nod. He nodded back, grinning in satisfaction. Once Gil had sat back down, it was Lutz's turn to stand and give a report. Given that their orphanage does not have divine gifts like in the temple's orphanage, we will need a lot more money to improve their living circumstances. The most problematic aspect here is that the farming town's orphanage do not consider all orphans equal like the temple's orphanage does. I can't imagine that improving their living conditions will be as peaceful of a process as it was here. Lutz had grown up in an environment where it was the survival of the fittest, even among family members. For this reason, he had been beyond confused upon seeing how thoroughly equal things were in the temple's orphanage. Their equality was the reason everything went so well, but Lutz maintained that it would be wrong of us to assume other orphanages followed a similar system. Furthermore, the orphanage director there, much like the Blue Priest here, should the orphanage start making a profit, there's a good chance that he'll simply steal it for himself. In that case, I began, it might be wise for me to make an entirely new orphanage prior to making the workshop. That way we could teach them the temple's way of life from the very beginning. Those who were used to a dog-eat-dog world instinctively know how to obey those stronger than them, so it will probably be easier to use my authority to create an entirely new foundation from which to start. Any city authority butting in to steal profits would, by extension, be getting in the way of our work on the printing industry. In other words, they were enemies of books, and I would not hesitate to use my authority to eliminate them. And also, they will be going against the Archduke anyway, which is not good, because he's the one who's setting up this whole printing industry. So, yeah. If we are incorporating the orphanage into the Rosemine Workshop, I do not mind putting money towards the building costs. But if we make this new orphanage a government-owned business instead, then the duchy will pay for it, right? Is that not obvious? Ferdinand asked with a raised eyebrow, but Benno shook his head. It may be difficult to make this a government-owned business. And why is that? The scholars seem to want to crush the printing industry before it even begins, Benno said, his gaze harsh. Mark quietly nodded beside him. I do not know what the scholars were told when they were given this job, but they seemed to hate doing it. It was as though they had been forced into doing a job that no one wanted. Lutz and Gil nodded in firm agreement as Benno spoke. The scholars who had gone with them had apparently given them an extremely hard time. Since you asked for my honest opinion, I will say this. It is hard to believe that these scholars were truly put in charge of beginning a new business under the Archduke's authority. As a humble merchant, it is impossible for me to determine whether they did not understand the Archduke's intention, whether they intentionally want the business to fail, or whether they are simply unintelligent. But with them in charge, the plan will fail without a doubt whatsoever. Benno had looked annoyed when I wanted to build a branch of the mine workshop in the orphanage, but even then, he hadn't told me it was impossible. He just advised me on the best way to proceed. The situation was seemingly so bad this time that Benno, a merchant with a keen nose for financial success and failure, was convinced that disaster awaited us. I gasped a little, fearing how likely it was for the printing industry to crumble before I had even been born. But Ferdinand looked nowhere near as concerned. There was a slight grin spread across his face. Yep, there's his evil villain smile. He's probably deviously plotting inside his head right now. I can already tell that the scholar officials who had accompanied Benno and Gil were going to be eaten alive. But since I didn't want the printing industry to be sabotaged, I merely looked on, silently giving Ferdinand my full support. I see. Your perspectives will no doubt prove useful. Coming here myself was a wise move after all. Now then, moving on. The Starbind ceremony is fast approaching. How stands the eatery? We were approaching a dinner that was not only being attended by the Archduke, but by his brother, his adopted daughter, and the commander of the Knights Order as well, aka his cousin. My head hurt just thinking about how high Sylvester's hopes probably were. Benno, however, gave an invincible grin. Things are proceeding quite well. Construction of the restaurant itself has finished. Our chefs are getting more skilled by the day, and we have more trained waiters at the ready. Most of our workers already have a lot of experience with nobles, so I predict that the meal will conclude without any problems. Good to hear. Anything else? That is all I have to report, Honorable High Priest. That said, there are some matters regarding the Italian restaurant that I would like to discuss with Lady Rosemine, Benno said sharply, glancing my way. Goodness, Benno, what's with that scary look in your eyes? It's not my fault that I couldn't contact you. In that case, I shall have Rosemine help organize your reports and calculate the initial cost of the venture. As the adopted daughter of the Archduke, she will need to learn the significance of establishing new industries. So you're saying that I need to understand the struggles of those actually doing the work, so that I don't make unreasonable demands like Sylvester. I hear you loud and clear. That said, I won't hold back at all if it brings me closer to getting my books. Rosemine, you may discuss these matters in your hidden room. Daniel will guard you. Bridget, stand guard here for the time being and finish your lunch. Sir. At Ferdinand's orders, Monica began preparing Bridget's lunch while Fran guided Ferdinand and Zom out of my chambers. Once I had seen them off, I pressed a hand against the hidden door and poured a small amount of mana into it. The mana flowed from my ring and the door opened once I had confirmed that the mana was indeed mine. Unlike Ferdinand's workshop, I had no mana restrictions for passing through the door, so anybody would be allowed to enter as long as they had my permission. Well, those of the Gilberta Company, please accompany me. Daniel may guard me as Ferdinand suggested, and Gil can accompany me as my attendant. Monica, in the meantime, please serve Bridget her food. You may press the face down on this door if you need me. Once everyone was inside, I gently shut the door. Inside my hidden room had a table and chairs like a parlor, and was about 3.5 meters per side. It wasn't particularly large as far as hidden rooms went. The more mana you put into one, the bigger the room became, but since mine only existed for me to talk to people about things I didn't even want my attendants to hear, there was no need for me to make it any bigger. I checked to make sure that the door was tightly shut, then exhaled. I didn't need to hold back any longer. I turned around, ran straight toward Lutz, and leaped into his arms. Ah, Lutz, I wanted to see you so bad. Whoa. I squeezed him tightly, nuzzling my head into his chest as I tried to push out all the frustration that had built up inside of me. I already hate being a noble. I'm stuck spending all day studying etiquette and all sorts of other stuff. It sucks. I'm exhausted. When I pass out, they force me back on my feet by making me drink nasty potions that make my head spin. Most of the people I meet are malicious schemers. There's nothing to brighten up my day. My family's not there. You're not there. My new mom and father won't give me any hugs. And listed all of my complaints about living in the noble quarter as I clung to Lutz, and he rested his head against mine as if to say he didn't know what else he could do. Mine? No, Lutz, you can't mix that up. You have to call me Rosemine now. Despite feeling a rush of emotions rise up in my chest at being called mine for the first time in ages, I had to shake my head. Lutz, give me a hug since my family can't. I need more. A lot more. And you can't get him for Ferdinand. He don't want to do it. Lutz obliged, wrapping his arms around me like he used to. A big, satisfied smile spread across my face, but everyone watching us was grimacing hard. But that wasn't enough to stop me. I wasn't satisfied yet. I looked up at Benno, my arms still tightly wrapped around Lutz. Benno, I have a request. What? Benno asked, his exasperated frown turning more cautious as he looked down at me. Could you scold me for a bit? Just a little. What? She misses that! Wow! Benno exclaimed, no longer looking at me with this guarded expression he always gave nobles. That alone was enough to make me feel happy. It might be because of my high stats, but nobody is willing to scold me in Cardstad's estate. Everyone praises me no matter what I do, and it's honestly kind of gross. I'm not even doing anything praiseworthy. Both my etiquette instructor and my personal tutor put me on such a high pedestal that it was actually uncomfortable. Not even Cardstad or Elvira would scold me either. Whenever I messed something up, they just smiled as though they were going to cut me off entirely, which was utterly genuinely terrifying. Benno listened to me with his head down, trembling all the while, then suddenly shot back up. You're letting your guard down too much, you idiot. You're already a thoughtless airhead who walks into trouble like a dumb baby. Don't make things worse. They're gonna exploit the hell out of you, he yelled, unleashing his thunder on me. Yes, that's it. That's what I wanted. That's much better. She missed that, apparently. Oh, the fact that even Benno's rage was enough to make me giddy with nostalgia showed just how much I had been suffering lately. I let out a sigh of satisfaction, which Lutz met with a heavy, contrasting sigh of exhaustion. He slumped his shoulders and leaned against me a little. Man, you haven't changed at all, huh? You're a noble now, but that's still the same old you on the inside. I mean, people don't change that easily, do you? What are you even saying, Lutz? Surely it would be more surprising if I wasn't the same old me. I had certainly got better at hiding my true self, and I was holding myself much more like a noble, but that was the same as ever on the inside. See? I told you, Benno said to Lutz in a somewhat defeated tone. Going from being a commoner to an archnoble isn't enough to change her at all. Lutz ground his teeth in frustration and glared at me. Dang it. Give me back all the tears I cried over never being able to see mine again. Okay, I'll get them all back and more through hugs. I thought that was a pretty good idea, but Lutz immediately turned me down. Weird. But either way, I treated my Lutz deficiency, and I felt great. If you're done there, can we get back on track? I want to talk about the fluffy bread we're going to sell in the Italian restaurant, Benno said, his eyes gleaming with the enthusiasm of a merchant. Oh, here we go. All that stuff. Seriously, has she not shown them how to make the fluffy bread yet? Really? One more chapter. How to make fluffy bread. When you say that you want to make fluffy bread, do you mean you want to know how to make natural yeast? Yep, that's right. I pursed my lips and fell into thought. Fluffy bread was my trump card to stay on top of other restaurants. Even if the chefs who knew all of my recipes were stolen away from us, the secret of yeast will remain with me. I had expected the Guildmaster and Lace to be our rivals, but they had joined the restaurant as partners. Lace was even teaching Hugo and Todd recipes. In all honesty, I didn't see any need for me to give fluffy bread to the store. I imagine that Sylvester will be looking forward to all sorts of unique foods, so I'll prepare yeast ahead of time for the meal I'm attending. Hugo and Todd will be able to make the fluffy bread just fine since they've done it before, but I'm not going to tell anyone how to make the yeast just yet. Please continue to run the store without fluffy bread for the time being. Huh? The bread Lace made in the Guildmaster's house was hard as was the bread I ate at Karstad's estate. The Italian restaurant would already be attracting customers by serving the kinds of food that nobles ate, which meant it didn't need fluffy bread. And why's that? Weren't we going to start selling it? Benno asked, his eyes wide. Mark and Lutz looked just as surprised. Benno seemed to quite like the fluffy bread, so he probably wanted to know the recipe for personal reasons too. I had intended to introduce the bread to show that nobody else can make the food that the Italian restaurant was serving, but now that the Guildmaster is on our side, who in the world will try to copy us? Who would face you and the Guildmaster head on at once? Nobody. We're going to stand unopposed. Well, I guess you're right about that. There were other stores big enough to do business with nobles, but nobody stood a chance at beating Benno and the Guildmaster when they were working together. And since the Italian restaurant targeted such a wealthy demographic, introducing several similar stores would lead to so much overlap that they'd all fail. One also had to consider how hard Benno had worked to prepare the food, chefs, waiters, and so on. Setting up the restaurant required an amount of work and financial investment that most merchants would balk at. Benno had only started this venture due to feeling competitive toward Lace and the Guildmaster, but most people weren't ridiculous enough to step foot into an entirely new industry out of spite. Not to mention, I need the fluffy bread a lot more than the Italian restaurant does. You need it. Why? Aren't you already eating it every day? I've been told that since I'm the Archduke's adoptive daughter now, I need to start new trends. In the world of nobles, it wasn't dignified to follow after those who were beneath you. That just wasn't Elvira's personal philosophy either. It was a fact of life for all archnoble women. The invention and spread of new things created demand, which in turn stimulated the duchy's economy, and it was the nobility's duty to keep the economy thriving. In other words, as the Archduke's adopted daughter, I needed to start coming up with trends that would make nobles want to spend loads of money. So basically, that's the situation. I'm tied up in annoying noble stuff, and I need to spread the fluffy bread through the Archduke's castle and the archnobles to secure my position in society. I think it'll be fine to share the recipe with the Italian restaurant once it has spread through my mother's faction. If you already have the Guildmaster on your side, then you don't need a trump card like yeast to boost her up, do you? Come on, the more trump cards I have, the better, Benno said with a dissatisfied look before conceding that he understood nobles had their own noble problems to deal with. They do. They have a lot to deal with. I still intend to make and sell the things I want through the Gilberta Company, so don't worry about that. You'll just have to give up on selling fluffy bread in the stores from day one. Alright, nothing wrong with adding to the menu over time. Trends flowed more easily from the top to the bottom, especially when it came to high-class stuff. It was easy for me to forget since I made them myself. And had them available all the time, but Ramsham, plant paper, hairpins, and picture books were all expensive enough that not everyone could afford them. The purchasing demographic was limited to those with money, and since those on top weren't allowed to follow those beneath them, I would have to spread my new ideas starting from the top. In any case, I fully intend to personally guarantee that the restaurant slogan that even nobles eat here will hold weight. Hopefully that's enough for you. Wait, personally guarantee? What are you planning here? Benno said with a wince. Wow, it looks like he doesn't trust me at all. Well, not that I didn't know that already. During the first trial run, when we have the owners of little large stores eating there, I'll participate as one of the restaurant's founders. The new High Bishop giving the restaurant her seal of approval will give you all the prestige you need, right? Well, regardless of what you're like on the inside, you're still the High Bishop and the Archduke's adopted daughter. The customers are going to freak the heck out. Heck, they will. I'll just be saying hello and then leaving, not participating in the meal myself. I wouldn't want them to be so scared that they can't even taste the food, I said. Just popping my head in and saying some generic line about looking forward to their continued patronage would be enough to do the trick. Plus, if those big store owners start flocking to Benno in the hope of getting connections with nobles and the Archduke, it will be easier to get their help when it came to expanding the print industry. Either way, I think you should leave as much of the restaurant to the Guildmaster as possible. You don't need to put that much of a burden on yourself, do you? Just to be clear here, the Guildmaster isn't the one joining us. It's his granddaughter. Benno was the only adult among those founding the restaurant. So he had said that he wanted to give it his full attention, but personally, I got the feeling that it would be totally fine to leave the whole thing to Frida. Having Frida on board is pretty comforting. She'll make sure we're earning a profit, and her whole family will most certainly toss in their support as well. I think you'll be fine taking a step back. Despite everything Frida said, her family did take good care of her. And much like Benno, her whole family had a keen nose for profit and would no doubt throw their full weight behind the Italian restaurant to ensure that they reaped as much financial gain as possible. But the moment I take too big of a step back, they're going to steal the whole operation, you know. Well, I think you're going to be too busy with the printing industry that you won't have any choice but to leave the Italian restaurant to them by the year's end. You should just be satisfied that you'll still be an investor and get some of the money it makes, I said, looking from Benno to Mark to Lutz. They were all wearing expressions that showed they weren't following me at all. Benno, you just said you didn't think the scholars were motivated enough to make the printing industry a success, right? Well, whether or not they're motivated doesn't matter at all. Even though it risks bringing the whole plan down, Benno asked with a dubious expression. I nodded. Just so you know, Sylvester gave an announcement to a bunch of nobles at my baptism ceremony. He said that he expects the printing industry to have spread throughout the duchy within the next 20 years or so. And judging by the evil look on Ferdinand's face earlier, I'm sure those rude scholars are going to be gone in no time. If anything, you should be worrying about our plans being accelerated even more. I had known that just by looking at Ferdinand's face that he was plotting some kind of trap. Hopefully it was one for the unmotivated scholars, but there was a chance that this was all his test to see how useful the Gilberta Company really was. In which case, Benno would be in serious trouble if he let his guard down. Don't make such a baseless prediction. It's not baseless, I declared, firmly puffing out my chest. It's a confident assertion based on my past experiences. While Benno continued looking at me doubtingly, Mark crossed his arms over his chest. Thank you very much for your valuable advice. We will hold it very close to our hearts. Mark, Master Benno, no matter how busy we may be, we must not avert our eyes from the truth. It is in the best interest to do as she advises, and prepare ourselves for whatever unreasonable demands we may be given. At those words, Benno, Lutz, and for some reason even Gil and Daniel all hardened their expressions. It sure is rough to serve under someone who has such unreasonable expectations. So, Benno, is that everything you wanted to talk about? Yeah, but no buts. I want to speak to Gil and Lutz, I said, leaning forward to get a closer look at them. Even though I had gone to other cities and the winter mansions of farming villages myself, I spent most of our journey on a high beast. And everyone was always really tense because of all the nobles around us when we were riding in our carriages. Plus, it wasn't as though we had been on a normal trip. All we had done was offer our prayers and then move on to the next place. I wanted to hear what a noble trip had been like, especially since Lutz had finally visited another city just like he had always wanted. So, you two, how was your first time visiting another city? How different was it from Ehrenfest? Did the carriage bouncing make you feel sick? And it bounced so much. It only took us half a day each way, but on both journeys, Gil was so sick he could barely sit straight. Hey, you weren't doing so great yourself, Lutz. Their eyes gleaming, Gil and Lutz started telling me all about their first trip. They spoke about how the carriage had bounced way harder than it did when in the city, how the noble scholars had been so smug that they both wanted to punch them in the face, how the other cities were so tiny and had so few people compared to Ehrenfest, how the orphanage was so bad that it reminded them of a year ago, and how they both resolved to get the dead-eyed orphans in rags a new lease on life. I see you both worked hard and didn't give up, even though it was your first time in a long carriage ride. You've got my thanks, Gil. I'm not allowed to pat your head outside anymore, but I'll give you all the praise you deserve in here. Gil ran over and knelt down so that I could pat his head, accepting my praise with a broad, happy grin. I thought you were never going to praise me again, no matter how hard I worked. Well, I can only pat your head in here from now on. Being of a high status is a lot more annoying than I thought it would be. Once I was done patting Gil's head, I went to do the same to Lutz, but he dodged my hand and said he wasn't interested. That was a bit vexing, so I gave him another hug instead. Now that I had heard their honest thoughts, it seemed like establishing printing workshops in the orphanage would be a tough ordeal. Benno, Mark, what do you think it'll take to bring printing into the orphanages? They barely have any people, and those who are there are mostly just weak kids. You'll probably be better off having them make paper instead of doing any printing. It's pretty hard to use the printing presses that Ingo's making, Benno said as he stroked his chin. Mark gave a troubled smile. Ehrenfest, where the Archduke resides, may be large, but the nearby cities are nowhere near as populated. In that case, it might be smart to divide the paper-making and printing industries. We can have them make paper in this region, while the workshop in the temple focuses exclusively on printing. Or alternatively, we could focus on finishing mimeograph printing as soon as possible. That way even weak kids would be able to print, I said, counting my ideas on my fingers as I listed them off. Benno scratched his head and looked down at me exasperatedly. Rosamond, do you have the time to be making inventions like that? Right now? Not at all. That's why I thought it would be fastest and easiest to just drop the pretext of negotiating with city authorities to find compromises, and instead just use my authority to establish new orphanages with workshops in them whether they like it or not. Plus, if I went ahead and added a chapel under the guise of spreading the good word of the gods, I could even make excuses for visiting the orphanages myself. Whoa there! You're already going crazy with power. Weren't you always talking about how you didn't like confrontations and such? I don't like confrontations, but this won't even be one. Considering my status, they'll literally have no choice but to do exactly what I say. I have a way to eliminate anyone who gets in the way of my bookmaking, so I might as well use it to make things easier. And not just on her, easier on everybody else. Because they can't go against the adopted daughter of the Archduke now, can they? Not without risking getting their head chopped off. To be honest, there was so much being thrown around that I had to learn. So many orders, jobs, duties, among other things, that I was sure my brain was about to explode. I didn't have the leeway to casually discuss matters with the authorities of small cities in order to find compromises or whatever. If I can use my authority to make my problems go away, then I might as well do just that. Who the hell gave a girl like this much power? My adopted father, the Archduke. Gah, there's no way I can pick a fight with him. Benno was cradling his head in his hands, but when it came to matters like this, one needed to have their priorities in order. And my first priority was making as many books as possible. It was a goal that mattered to me no more than anything else, so that I was willing to use all the money and power at my disposal to achieve it. Fulfilling my duties as the High Bishop and the Archduke's adopted daughter was nothing but a means to an end. And I didn't want to waste my time on those standing in my way who were no match against my new authority. You might say I'm going crazy with power, but under normal circumstances, a little girl who just finished her baptism ceremony like me would never have this much control. This is only possible since Sylvester is even more impatient than I am. That seemed to ring a bell for Benno, and he let out a despairing groan. Benno placed a hand on his forehead as well. And as expected, Sylvester's rampage was giving everyone in the Gilberta Company a hard time. As I watched them start to seriously discuss, with stiff expressions, what unreasonable demands Sylvester would give them at the meal, Lutz took out a folded sheet of plant paper. He glanced around before handing it to me with a whisper. I figured I should give you this before I leave. It's a letter. It was written on the paper that I had bought as mine, and asked Lutz to give to my family so they could write letters without needing to worry about the costs. Between mine's death and Rosemine going to the nobles' quarter, I had consulted Ferdinand and written a letter to Benno requesting that he organize the arrangement. According to Ferdinand, the story in the lower city was that a noble had killed mine, and my family had been given a portion of the money confiscated from him as an apology. But my family had apparently refused to take it, since they would feel like they had sold me for money. I could see them reacting like that. So that money and mine's wealth instead went to me, and I could use it however I liked. If I sent my family some ink and the paper and a letter asking them to write back to me, they wouldn't have much choice, and if they sent me letters, then I'd be a little less lonely. I'm so smart. This letter was written to the mine who died, so don't expect it to be addressed to Lady Rosemine or anything. I anxiously opened the first letter from my family and immediately saw Tully's clumsy letters scrawled across the page. She wasn't used to writing yet, and this was her first time using ink, so there were smudges all over the paper. Some letters trailed in the wrong direction, and others were fused together, so the only line I could actually read was, I'm doing great, mine. I hate to ask, but what does this say? Oh, let's begin. That line says she started studying sewing at Karina's workshop. This line here is from your dad. He said that Camille started to move his head around. And this bit is from your mom. She's been real worried about whether you've been getting sick or not. Dad needed to know how to write for work, and I had seen his handwriting during my time at the gate, so even though it definitely had some quirks, I could read it without issue. But Mom had only just started learning, so her handwriting was even harder to read than Tully's. The worst part, however, was that they had all written on the same small sheet of paper they had gone through the effort to sending me a letter, and yet I couldn't even read it. Lutz, could you ask them to use one sheet of paper each? I can't read when all the letters are overlapping. I did tell them that, but they just said it'd be a waste of expensive paper. That was something I could definitely see them saying. I had used my savings to buy the paper and ink, since I knew both would be too expensive for my family to afford. I wanted them to use the paper freely so that I could at least read the letters. I'll tell them so that you won't be able to read it unless they use a sheet of paper each. Thanks, Lutz. I'll quickly write a response. Could you give them to them for me? Sure. As I looked around the mostly empty room, thinking that I would need to go and fetch some writing utensils and paper, Mark suddenly pulled out a writing set from his belongings and placed it on the table. I shall lend you these. It would be best for you to write the letter here. I can always count on you, Mark. It's amazing how you always know exactly what to do, I said before borrowing Mark's stuff, and immediately starting my reply. I wrote that I was busy, but doing great too. With that done, we had finished discussing everything we needed to keep private, and so exited the hidden room to begin lunch. As Bridget had already finished, she swapped places with Daniel and came over to join us. "How was lunch, Bridget? Did it suit your taste?" I asked, as my own food was being prepared. Bridget was a regular noble, and as the Italian restaurant's opening was drawing ever closer, I wanted as many noble opinions as I could get. "Absolutely, it was beyond delicious. You have excellent chefs, Lady Rosemine. I must admit, I'm quite looking forward to being your guard now," Bridget replied. Her sharp, refined expression didn't falter, but I noticed that her amethyst eyes were wrinkled in the beginnings of a smile. If she was going that far to compliment the food, then it was safe to say that she really did like it. Just as I let out a sigh of relief, I noticed a reddish-orange braid come into my peripheral vision. "Lady Rosemine, I made half of this," Nicholas exclaimed, beaming a proud smile as she brought over our plates. Back before I had left for the noble's quarter, she had told me that she wasn't confident enough in her cooking skills to serve me. But her brimming excitement was enough for me to be able to tell that she had become a lot more skilled since then. I was looking forward to digging in. "Lady Rosemine, do you have any new recipes? I want to try making more things. I love tasty food, and the best part about serving you is the food I get to cook." "I'll work as hard as it takes to make even more tasty food," she declared without an ounce of hesitation. I couldn't help but chuckle. "I'll have some more new recipes written for you by tonight. I trust you and Ella to learn them well. But I would first be teaching them how to make natural yeast, under the understanding that they were not to share that information with anyone else." Once that was done, I wanted them to master sweets recipes that would most likely be popular with archnoble women. There were rooms that were apparently kept ice cold through the use of magic tools, so maybe it would be best to focus on making cold sweets, especially in a hot season like this. Maybe I could try putting a book together called Rosemine's Ravishing Recipes once the printing industry has taken off. I mean, you could. Oh no, the Starbind ceremony! I'll have to work on that later. I'll see y'all next time.